Hello and welcome to Relocating during COVID-19. I'm Sue Jacobs and I'm a faculty member at Oklahoma State University in the Counseling and Counseling Psychology program. But for today, I'm a member of the SCP COVID-19 Special Task Group. And that's the people who put this webinar together. I want to give you a little bit of background about the webinar. The special task group created a survey of members' top concerns related to COVID-19. I think it was about 4 to 6 weeks ago. It seems like ages. And at that point, one of the top concerns for graduate students and early career professionals was moving or relocating during COVID-19. And so we thought it was important to put this together. Now, since then, there have been a lot of changes. We also have all sorts of things that a lot of us are involved in terms of Black Lives Matter, and we have, exposure rate going up and going down in different places. But we think some of the concerns may be the same. Relocating and forming community in new locations is, of course, stressful and under any circumstances. And most of you, we assume, have moved at least once, if not more often in your life. So you know something about moving, but not during a pandemic. We're glad to hope we have other training directors in the audience today who can answer questions and contribute to this on our question and answer box. But we're here with training directors who want to support interns moving, people moving to new graduate programs, postdocs, or new employees who are moving to new jobs. Normally, when there's a Division 17 webinar, the presenters have some amount of expertise on their topic. It's important for us to note that we aren't experts in this. Except for me, the other people and Sonia, who will introduce herself later, the other 3 people on the panel are in the middle of relocating and likely experiencing some of what you're experiencing. They found some things, they have things to offer, but we're offering today humbly with the hope that you're able to take away something that feels helpful for you from today's webinar. I'm going to give a few housekeeping things as I ask for us to move on to the next slide. One of the housekeeping details is this, like all the SCP webinars, will be videotaped, and you will be able to get the access to tape later on the Division 17 webpage or Facebook page and on the YouTube channel. We also, at the end of the webinar, will send the slides to all of you using the list of attendees, so you have those. The other housekeeping thing is that you may ask questions throughout, but we'll have a specific time for answering questions after initial presentations. And we hope there's lots of questions and discussion based on the questions. We'll probably have around 20 minutes, give or take, for questions and answers with the presenters. And then finally, at the very end, we're going to have you sort of reflect for a couple minutes by yourself on what you learned today and what your reflections are. And if you want to identify one action step and write it down, we hope you do that. We also invite you to put it in the question and answer box for other people to see it, but you don't have to do that. And at the very end, we think it's really important for people to have some opportunity to create community with others who may be moving to similar locations, similar types of new situations, doing it virtually and not in face-to-face situations, to continue to network and maybe just feel you have a sense that you have some community besides where you're actually going, And with that, I want to move and introduce our panelists. I think I got all them, yeah. The panelists are shown sort of on the screen, and I'll get off the screen in a while. The panelists are Josh Goodman, who's moving from Maine to Memphis, and he will talk more about where he's moving and why he's moving. He's got a tenure track position. Yay for Josh. Then it's going to be CJ Park, whose face may or may not be showing now, who is moving from a doctoral program at the University of Missouri to University of Utah Counseling Center. Meryl Ryder is moving from the Oklahoma State University Counseling Psychology doctoral program to George Mason University Counseling Center in Fairfax, Virginia. And Sonia Dalawal, I hope I got that right, Sonia, is a training director at the UNLV Student Counseling and Psychological Services Center, and she will tell you more about that. So with that, I'm going to invite each of the panelists to introduce themselves. Josh?
Hi everyone, my name is Josh Goodman, and as Sue mentioned, I am in the process of relocating. I'm in my final days as a visiting faculty member at Bates College in Lewiston, Maine, and I'm beginning a new faculty position at Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee.
Hello everyone, I'm CJ Park. Yeah, I'm CJ Park. I'm a doctoral student at University of Missouri Counseling Psychology program, and I'll be moving to Salt Lake City to start my internship at the University of Utah Counseling Center. Yeah, and now I'll turn it over to Meryl.
My name is Meryl Ryder, and I am at Oklahoma State University, doctoral candidate, and moving to Fairfax, Virginia in just a few weeks to start my internship at George Mason University. And now over to Sonia.
So hi everyone, I'm Sonia Dhaliwal. I am the training director at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I was actually a postdoc here many moons ago, so it's nice to return and represent UNLV in this way. And we have an APA accredited internship at our counseling center, and happy to be part of this webinar. Just a gentle reminder, there should be a brief poll for you to answer popping up on the screen right about now. So just a reminder to participate in that. Thank you.
And just as the answers will be anonymous and just reported as percentage data. Help us know who else is here and help the panelists know.
Right, well, I'll get started with our first slide. So again, I'm Josh Goodman, relocating from...
I don't think it's, Josh, I don't think it's finished yet, Josh. It needs to scroll down. Can they scroll down? I need...
Oh, is there... Let me know when folks are ready to go.
Let me... Okay, Josh.
All right. So once again, my name is Josh Goodman. I'm in the process of relocating from Maine to Tennessee, and As you might imagine, I've done some Google searches related to, you know, moving, and as a result, I'm getting some like advertisements in my social media feeds. And one of them that I got recently showed this like happy family, everybody with a smile on their face, unpacking a moving truck. And I thought, well, gee, isn't this the most unrealistic depiction of moving that I've seen? Because in my experience, in the few times that I've moved, it has, even under the best of circumstances, been pretty stressful. And actually, there's some research that backs that up. And so I want to take some time to talk a little bit about some of the research considerations and how that may play into things. So overall, there's a body of research about stressful, you know, life events that people experience. The Holmes-Rocky stress inventory is a prominent example of this. And in terms of good or at least neutral kinds of events that happen in a person's life, as opposed to something that's more, you know, a sad event or a tragedy. In terms of those good events, beginning a new job and relocation are among some of the very most stressful things that a person can experience. And that makes sense because, you know, moving to a new place, sort of, you know, leaving behind one network of social support, trying to establish a new network of social support, being in a just different location, doing different tasks at a job and working with a new set of people. All of those, even though they represent good things, can be just a lot to take in. And so I do want to note that even, again, under the best of circumstances, moving and beginning a new job, it can be a lot to absorb. And in addition to these, you know, good sort of aspects and milestones, there's also some potential related stressors to the relocation process and to beginning, you know, a new position. So one is that moving is expensive, especially as a student or perhaps beginning as a postdoc. It can really drain financial resources, and that, of course, can be an additional source of stress. And then relocation can also mean moving away from social support systems. And for folks moving with a partner or with children, this can create additional stresses within the family unit as well. You know, having a partner who's also going through the relocation process, or perhaps supporting children with the move for them, and also, you know, managing your own move and new position. Certainly cultural factors can be at play as well. So, you know, in particular, there's research to suggest that, you know, for folks who come from a more collectivistic background or orientation and perhaps are in the position of leaving behind, you know, family members in town, that especially can be particularly difficult. There's some research out there about how folks may sort of come about navigating the stress that comes from the relocation process. And so I want to take a minute or two to describe one model for conceptualizing this. This is from Robin Martin. And in this model, Martin looked at pre and post-move mental health for people at a company that was relocating an office of employees. One of the factors that Martin examined was pre-move relocation preparation. This included things like having information about the move, having ways to get more information, and feeling a sense of agency related to the upcoming move. More preparation ahead of time predicted, along with just like pre-move mental health, predicted problems or challenges related to the relocation process, and that in turn was predictive of post-move mental health. Extrapolating this to the current situation, one of the things that this could suggest is that the more that you can do to prepare for your move ahead of time, the better. So that might mean, you know, identifying what are the particular tasks that you need to take in order to, you know, accomplish each aspect of the move. What kinds of things maybe feel uncertain, and what kind of information can you get that's going to help you to maybe have answers to those things that feel uncertain. One of the things that's worth knowing is that, as I'm sure you may be acutely aware of, some aspects of moving may be more complicated due to the pandemic. These include things like securing housing in a new city, selling furniture where you are now, or if in maybe better times you might have had some friends or family members help you pack or help with the moving process. They might not be able to due to social distancing, and so maybe there's things that you may need to be doing more on your own right now. And so to the extent that you can, again, identify the different components of moving, plan ahead of time, get information where you don't have the answers that you need, that might help to manage your stress. Likewise, certainly seeking out social support and asking folks questions where you want answers might help out as well. And then finally, I want to note that we're of course in the middle of this pandemic, and that has an impact on our mental health, and all of us also have other things going on. And so of course this relocation is not happening in a bubble. So to the extent that you can do things that may help to just take care of yourself more generally, that can also help to perhaps lessen some of the stress that's related to the relocation process. And so with that said, I want to pass it on over to CJ Park, who's going to be talking about creativity and flexibility related to the relocation process.
Hey Josh. So as Josh mentioned, because of the pandemic, some of the usual strategies that we may use in finding housing and planning the move may not be, realistic or possible at this point. But still, there are different ways that we can be creative and flexible in approaching these different issues. For example, housing. Some apartment may not allow for in-person tour, but then they may still offer online tour, and they are still provide pretty good amount of information through online sites. So that could be one way you can look up the housing. I mean, I myself couldn't really travel to Salt Lake City to look for the places I can live, but then I found it's helpful to maybe really look through 2 or 3 sites and see if there's any place that seems reasonably okay for me to move into. And you may also reach out to university residential office because they may provide housing for staff and students. So if you're just going to be there for maybe 1 year, maybe looking for those options could be possible as well. And you can also reach out to current interns, staff, and students who might be moving or who know somebody who might be moving around the time that you need to move in. So, I mean, the current interns, they will be leaving because, their internship will be wrapping up. But then you can also think about the students in their counseling side program or related programs who would also be leaving for internship. So just think about different people that you can reach out to. And then I didn't put it up here, but then you can also reach out to your communities as well. For example, I'm Korean, and I know that for a lot of our Korean communities, church kind of act as the hub of information. So you could reach out to the church and see if there's any possible places that you can rent or get a roommate for or something like that. So that's also a possibility. And then the other thing that I think kind of just personally found helpful was just reminding myself that the house that I'm going to find doesn't have to be the perfect house or the most ideal apartment that I can ever find. Because at least for the people who are going for internship, it's likely that you're only going to stay there for 1 year. So as long as the housing that you're looking for has all the top priorities, that even if it's not the best housing, you can probably be okay to live there for 1 year. Yeah. Oh, yeah, and by the way, if you guys have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to put it in the Q&A box or the chat box for us. I think the Q&A might actually be better. Yeah. Yeah. And then the other thing is transportation. So I think there's pros and cons in both driving and flying. And so I think it's important to think through the different risks involved with each method, and then just trying to plan ahead and take safety measures. For example, if you're flying, it might be a good idea to pack an additional mask in case something happens to your first mask, or if you need to stay in the airport for a long time and you don't feel comfortable wearing the same mask for over that extended period of time. And if you're driving, then you can think about where you can possibly stop for maybe drive through a diner or something like that. And in terms of timing, when you need to move, I think especially if you're planning on going on internship, I think it'll be really valuable for you to reach out to your training directors and see if they have any special plan for the orientation. Because at least for my internship site, they told me that they're going to have their orientation remotely. So as long as I'm in the state of Utah, I don't actually have to be physically in Salt Lake City to be a part of that orientation process. So that means that I don't have to really find housing and move in by August 1st or something like that. So I think that will be also really good information for you to check about as well. And lastly, one thing that kind of really made me really sad about this whole pandemic situation is that I won't be able to get to say proper goodbyes to my friends here. I mean, if it was just every day, if it was just without the pandemic, then I will have like goodbye dinners, or maybe have a potluck together, or do some fun things together before I have to leave. But right now, that's not really like safely possible. But still, I think you can be really creative and saying goodbye to people that you care about. You could have social distance picnic, or you can also write and mail physical letters. So even though you won't be able to say goodbye in person or physically, you can still send them something that's physical. So I think there's different ways that we can be creative and flexible in this situation. Okay. So with that, I will hand over to Meryl.
All right, so my name is Meryl, and I am here to share with you all the uncertainty that we are all in this together, and everyone is feeling nervous and anxious about what is going on. I think that was one thing that was going to really connect us, as we were kind of talking about, like, how do we talk about being experts and moving during something we've never done before. So there's just kind of keeping that in mind, that you're not alone, whether you're a student, whether you're moving, to an internship and not knowing what it's going to look like. You're not alone in knowing that, what are the supervision going to be like? What is community going to look like? And so I'm just here. Josh said a lot of good things. CJ said a lot of good things, about different ways to connect and different ways to say goodbye. And so something that I wanted to really talk about was just things that I have done, and things that I found really helpful. So I have been lucky that my training director has reached out and has given me some information about what to expect, and really let me know where I needed to be and when I needed to be there. And so I just also want to encourage people to ask questions, that it's not a burden, and that your questions are wanted. I think hopefully Sonia's going to back me up on that. But also needing to stay in touch with your friends and your family and loved ones from your home institution or from home. We're finding all of these different ways to connect with people, and continuing to do that just as you would kind of in any other way. Being on, connecting with your own cohort members, like CJ was talking about. And, I found it comforting to know that other people's internships are a little bit different as well. And so we can talk about those pieces, and that nobody signed up for what they're currently going into. And I think that's an important thing, whether you're a training director, whether you're a intern or a new faculty member. We're all going into this as a very brand new thing. And then communicating concerns to both your internship training director and then your training director at your academic institution, I think is going to be really important. Making sure that everyone's on the same page. The reason why I say that is there's somebody in my cohort whose date got pushed back, and it's going to push back their graduation. And so just making sure that things are on the same page, and that your home institution is being made aware of what's going on if there is something that does change. And then we were talking a lot about what is important, and moving at a time like this when you need community is, when there's these different protests and different ways to engage in social justice and advocacy work. I think it's important, to find the community that works for you, and find the way that protesting or joining any type of movement, whatever that might be, what that looks like for you. So maybe coming from Stillwater, it's a little bit of a smaller town and it's easier to socially distance at a protest. Whereas when I moved to the Fairfax, Virginia area, which is very close to DC, I think the level of comfort actually attending an in-person demonstration or act of solidarity is going to be harder, or just a little bit less comfortable for me. So finding those different ways as you move, adjusting to what you feel comfortable doing, but keeping with your values and keeping with being active in those activities and the things that you're currently doing. So reaching out to, synagogues, churches, LGBTQ centers, just different places, it's really going to be helpful. Find your people wherever you are. And I also wanted to kind of talk about when you're meeting with your new cohort, that could be new, that could be different. It's going to look different. There's not going to be the meeting at the bar and getting to talk and hang out. So finding what people are comfortable with, being okay with being that person to initiate those happy hour hangouts and things like that. Because people are all wanting to connect. It's just a very awkward time in knowing how to do it and what to do. So that is what I have to say. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sonia, who's going to hopefully again validate all of the things about asking questions. And so thanks, and turning it over.
All right, pressure is on. Last one here to present. I just want to say, I think that the panel has already made some really excellent points that I'll hopefully just be reiterating and hopefully just be adding to, and just to emphasize, it is a very stressful time, I think, obviously for incoming interns, also for training directors. This is the first time that a lot of us have had to basically online an entire training program or orientation. So this is new for all of us, and I kind of look at it as a new experience, and hopefully going through this will just make us that much, I think, stronger of a program or more adept at using technology in the future. So positive reframes. It's always about positive reframes. One of the things to think about, and I will preface this by saying that every training program is different because a lot of this is also state dependent. Funding, budgets, funds available for professional development. So just kind of keeping that in mind as I walk through some of these points. But some of the things that UNLV is doing to prepare our incoming interns is, well, the first thing I've done is had virtual meetings with our incoming interns and our current interns. It kind of gives folks an opportunity to ask questions about our site. What are the opportunities for telehealth training? So for example, here at UNLV CAPS, we had our current interns go through a telehealth training so that they could work remotely. And for our incoming trainees, we had them complete a free APA approved telehealth training. So everybody coming in has been telehealth trained, which hopefully will make things a little bit easier and kind of alleviate some of that anxiety about doing telehealth work. So in our virtual group, we talked a lot about questions folks had about that. What does a telehealth training look like? How do I have access to it? What do you need from me? Because I think, and I'll speak for myself as a training director, once we had trainees complete a telehealth training, I had them send me their certificates so I could kind of keep track of who has the training and who doesn't. Everyone thankfully sent me their certificates, so we're kind of ready to go on that front. I also, had some questions about the start date of internship. So for us over here, we're starting August 3rd. And so far, that date has not been pushed back. So the hope is that that will be our start date. And we are doing sort of a hybrid model of a virtual orientation and also an in-person meeting. So what I like to do, if this is possible, and again, I feel like the COVID situation is always evolving, but have our first meeting with the interns be in person in a bigger room, that we have downstairs and kind of have different staff WebEx in to meet our interns on that first day. And then after that, the entire kind of orientation will be virtual and remote when it comes to meeting different people from different departments, so on and so forth. So like everyone, I think has already mentioned on the panel, you know, you want to be in communication with your training director if you have questions about what this virtual orientation will look like. You know, can I do it from home? Am I allowed to come to the office and use my office computer to access the virtual orientation? Keeping in mind when you first move, it might take some time for you to set things up. Maybe you don't have Wi-Fi access. How is that going to work? I've already had some folks ask me about that, and we're letting them do a lot of that virtual orientation from their offices here at the center. So just something to kind of keep in mind and talk to your training director about. You know, funding has been affected, and you know, we raised our intern salaries this year. We were very happy and glad to do that. And so our intern salaries will not be impacted. However, at least for the state of Nevada, all state employees starting July 1st will have 1 furlough day for the rest of the year. Now, obviously this does impact things, but it will not be impacting our internship, as I think with a lot of other sites, because the CTC recently put out a statement saying that interns and trainees, you know, should not have their internships affected by furloughs, because that could severely not only affect their training experience, but it could delay their graduation dates. It could delay trainees being able to get an adequate amount of hours. So maybe this helped alleviate some anxiety. I don't think interns need to worry about that piece, but that is a possibility depending upon where you're going. So maybe something to check in about with current interns at your site that you're going to. You know, I think it's also important to talk about PPE, protective equipment like masks and things. Again, different places have different requirements. Here, our requirements are to definitely have a mask. We're also happy to provide that for folks. Some places it might be a mask and gloves. So you just want to make sure you have that information beforehand. I think it just helps alleviate some anxiety too. And I'm sure your training director, you know, they have that information, will be happy to provide that. And, you know, last but not least, I think keeping in contact with the current interns to talk about housing. I think asking them questions about what it was like for them to transition to working remotely. Was the center supportive? Did you feel supported? We, at our site, recently developed a COVID-19 survey that we sent out our current interns to see how they felt about our site and if we provided adequate training and support during this time. So I think those are just some other helpful questions to ask if you haven't already. And I think that kind of sums up what I have to say. I'm happy to answer the questions that come through the Q&A if there are more questions. Also happy to answer questions after this webinar is done. And again, just a gentle reminder, there is a poll that should be showing up on the screen. If you just take some time to answer that.
And while we are waiting for the poll to come in, I think some people, including myself, are worried about the financial cost of moving. And I just want to let people know that SAS is actually in the process of providing emergency fund for students who are affected by the COVID. So we are still in the process of preparing it. So I don't know like exactly when we're going to announce it, but yeah, that's something that's in the mix. And also I know that Asian American Psychological Association is also planning on providing similar fund for students as well. So I think might have to be on the lookout for those opportunities as well.
Thank you, CJ. I was going to say a little bit more about financial things. We talked about this as a COVID-19 meeting, and a lot of the training directors and other people there said, once again, as Sonia said and Meryl said, talk to your training director. And again, this changes from institution to institution, but some places might be able to find some pockets of money to help you with the move. And so this again reiterates that it's important to keep in contact with people and ask. Okay.
And it looks like we
So
have a question. Sorry, Sue, I just saw a question pop up.
Go ahead.
So it's just a question about what is your impression of job opportunities for new psychologists entering the field from postdoc? I'm happy to answer that live if that's appropriate, or type it in. I guess I'll just.
It's appropriate right now. It's okay. Appropriate. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that is a really good question. And, you know, we get sort of every week, I think pre-COVID, I would get a list of available job openings and postdoc openings that I would forward on to the interns. So, you know, I haven't really seen a significant decrease with that at all. At least nothing that's been noticeable for me to be like, wow, like the job market's really been impacted. I think if anything, there's going to be an even bigger need for mental health after COVID, and people are, I mean, just at our center, we're already having folks very anxious, you know, it's triggered their depression, social isolation. So I think if anything, it would maybe create more opportunities for work in the field. So hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, we give everyone a couple minutes to look at how many people said what in terms of their current concerns, and there are still many concerns. It seems like the highest concerns are exposure to COVID-19 and actually moving. So that's probably not that different than it was a number of weeks ago. I'm going to close this, but you could get it later. I really encourage people to write some more questions or comments in the question and answer box, and all the panelists can see them. We have no questions at this point, so while we're waiting for questions, panelists, like CJ just came in with a comment, do any of the others of you, or CJ again, have comments about what each other said? Things you'd like to add to that? Any of that?
I guess I'll go in and add that I know that this is about coronavirus and moving during that time and asking questions about, and I think I want to also point out that not every question has to be related to coronavirus. So, you know, that it is about internship. And when I got an email from my training director, I loved that it talked about like which groups would I want to join or be part of. And that kind of was this, oh yeah, we're still going to get to do this internship thing. We're still going to get to do the things that we were talking about in interviews. And that's just, I want to kind of emphasize, at least from my experience, that it was really kind of validating and reassuring to actually have a conversation about internship related things, you know, that wasn't really specifically related to coronavirus. And so I know that there are people with questions, because I have learned through all the years that I can't be the only one. And so asking, you know, your training director, if you have questions about groups or different types of advocacy or outreach that you're looking forward to, I think it's totally, again, I'm going to look at Sonia to back me up on this, because I haven't been a training director or an intern, but that taking the conversation outside of coronavirus too is completely appropriate. And yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Meryl. You know, I think some folks have a fear of you know, will COVID affect certain things that I'm able to do on internship? And really, when we were looking at our data to write our end of year report recently, you know, all of the new initiatives that we had pretty much continued, but just via an online platform. So, you know, we were doing like people of color workshops and groups and things that, you know, they were put on hiatus for just a little bit, but then we were able to successfully continue via an online platform. So that makes sense, what you said.
We have a couple questions, and I will read the first one. And I would invite other training directors who may be here to add to whatever Sonia has to answer. But it's like, and Mira might say too. How should I talk to my training director about my health issues that put me at a very high risk with COVID? For example, my doctor has informed me it's important that I do not go into a shared office space. I think that's a great question. And this morning, as I was looking at the slides, I thought, so we forgot to add that. So thank you for whomever asked it. Who wants to start with that?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. That is a really good question. Thank you for asking that. That is something that I think sometimes gets overlooked. And you know, I think your training directors want to support you in any way that they can. And so I think it's really important to communicate that to your training director. You know, I know with us, I've had interns, you know, talk to me about their health concerns, and we've had a couple of folks this year when COVID happened, we had them work remotely right away. So that they were not in the office at all, and we were happy to accommodate them that way. So I would reach out to your training director and just have a conversation with them about what the options are, and I'm sure they would be happy to accommodate that.
Okay, the second question is, do you have any recommendations for ensuring that all our requirements are met during internship? What are your impressions about the ability to meet these hour requirements at University Counseling Center sites?
Yeah, another really good question. So folks, feel free to jump in if you want to add. I don't want to hog the time, but no, that is a really good question. And, you know, I will just speak from my experience with interns this year. We are at a site where there's always just a very high clinical demand for our services. So really the COVID barely affected that. We were still getting calls and emails and questions about services. So I think it would also be site dependent. And again, I would communicate with your training director to ask them about that, because at a site that typically, where there is a very high clinical demand, you don't really have to worry about that. I think some places it might be different, depending just on your location. But either way, you know, I mean, your training director, supervisor, whomever should be able to sit down with you and maybe come up with a plan if the COVID situation continues to get worse, and if, you know, if your hours are affected. I think coming up with a plan around that would be a good idea.
And just from my experience, so my training director has informed me that so doing assessment is a part of the requirement. Like it's usually the part of the requirement for the internship and that side. But then because of, you know, like it could be difficult to meet people in person to do the assessment. And so I think they're still deciding whether to like do the hybrid model of doing something in person versus and then doing something telehealth, or, you know, just having everything done telehealth. But then if like for whatever reason, if that's not a possibility, then they are going to be flexible and waive the requirements. So I think training directors are really willing to be flexible in those requirements as well.
What are your thoughts on how to break into the site community as a new trainee? Community is valuable to me, and I worry it will be less of a priority since the majority of providers will have already developed relationships, community, pre-COVID-19. Who wants to start with that first?
I can take that. I think that hopefully wherever you may be going, the folks who are already there will want to get to know you as well. I think in general, having new folks come in is probably a breath of fresh air and something exciting at what is overall a pretty heavy and difficult time. And with that said, I encourage you to, well, I'll say it would be great for sites, so for any training directors who may be on the call to like maybe help facilitate some opportunities for that, for getting to build community. But even if you're, the new intern or postdoc or whatever that might be, asking to have like a Zoom lunch or a virtual lunch with one of your new colleagues to get to know them, maybe talk about the work that they do at the counseling center or whatever site you might be at. And I imagine most people like to talk about themselves, and so I imagine most folks would be happy to meet with you. And so I imagine there may be ways in which it may take a little bit more effort to build community, especially when I think of like my internship here. Some of the most meaningful moments were just like stopping by people's doors when they were open and popping in to say hi, and that kind of organic interaction is a lot less, that interaction is still possible, but it might be less organic, might have to be more planned. But I think certainly everybody's going to have that craving for community and interaction and getting to know the new folks as well.
And I think Meryl made a really good point before, but you will have your incoming cohort with you. So you won't be the only, hopefully you won't be the only new person in that community. So I think what the really good suggestion Meryl made was like, you could be the first one to suggest those virtual lunch and things like that. And I think that will be a really good way to start building your own community, I think.
I'm not relocating. I'm not relocating, but we, in an academic department, and this might happen too, I noticed that one or two people were moving onto a graduate program for the first time, and a new program and relocating. And I know we got a thing from our department chair or school head today that gave a tentative plan for the protective equipment and what's going to happen on our wing of our hall, right? And so when you talked about knock on the door, Josh, there's going to be little whiteboards put on all faculty and graduate assistants' doors. And one of the things you can say is, I'm working at home, or you could say, knock, I'm in here. But there's also going to be expectations for social distancing, and there'll be masks provided. And for some people who may be doing research with individuals, there might be the shields, et.cetera. And so that's something, I think it answers two things. It gives you another way, if you have some that you could suggest where you're going. You have something that's some way to let people know, this is where I am, you can contact me. So any other questions or comments? I know there's got to be a lot of experience in the participants. We'd love to hear it. Some of what you've tried and some of what, whether you're not sure if did that work or did it mess up, or we've got a few minutes yet to talk. So do you think we should move on to the next team, or what do you think? Okay, what we're going to ask you to do now, if you remember from the very first slide, we're going to ask you to sort of develop a brief action plan. And so we'd like you to sort of reflect on one specific step that you could take based on what you heard and learned today, to perhaps make the navigation of your relocation easier. And if you aren't relocating, if you can think of one specific step you might do at your site to make it easier for those who are coming in. And we're going to give you a couple minutes to do that. We'd love for you to post it on the Q&A if you want to, but you don't have to. You can keep it for yourselves. So we'll just Give you 2 minutes at this point. There are a couple people who having posted on the Q&A if people want to read what a couple of them shared, and we thank you for doing that. The last comment sort of leads us into the next thing. It says, as a postdoc who has relocated several times for internship in my current position, I'm happy to share tips about the places I have lived, food, housing, etc. Do you want to move it to the next slide, Josh? One of the things I think might be very important, and this is what I think all the panelists talked about, is creating new communities and networks. And so to help with that, we've created a brief information sheet. It's a Qualtrics doc. We're going to give you some time now, about 5 minutes to pull it up and answer it. It's a very short one, unless you have trouble pulling it up. I think Meryl took it today and said it probably took less than 3 minutes. We'll be asking you for your name, your email address, where you're moving from, where you're moving to, your roles at different places, what you'd like from something like this, and whether you want to be anonymous or not. So for example, the person who said they're willing to give tips to others could fill out their information and then write in what they're willing to do and how to contact. They'll know how to contact them with the email. You'll have the ability to say whether, you'll have the ability to say whether you want your email confidential or you want to publish to that list of people. Okay, so I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Okay. Josh, could you do me a favor and see if you can copy the link and send it to people? Somebody's not able to open it from the slide. Thank you, Maggie.
Yes, I'll go ahead and send that.
Okay.
Okay, there it is.
There it is, okay.
correct me if I'm wrong, but then I think we are planning on sending out the PowerPoint slides and the link to the survey after the webinar is over. So if you don't have time to fill out the survey right now, I think you can still get a chance to do it later.
Yeah, yes, we will send out the slides with that, but it would be nice now if we have some of it so people can access one another. When they're, and I think there's so much going on that sometimes we feel overwhelmed trying to do everything, at least for most people I talk to. So let's see. So let's see. But we will send out, we will have the list of people who registered for the day, and we will send the survey out, and we'll also, we will not send the link, but with the information on the Qualtrics, except to people who say, who fill out the survey and say they don't want to be part of that. So as people are filling that out, we have 4 more minutes before we close, so that people who finish that would like to make some closing comments, I invite you to. I know someone wrote in who's who's also a member, co-chair of the SCP COVID-19 group. Does that person have anything that they'd like to say to folks? Maggie, do you have anything you'd like to share with people? Why don't we have one last thing from each of the panelists, and then we'll log off and let you get back to what else you're doing. I'll just say, as the moderator, I'm sure the others join me in being really, really happy that you're here. I want to wish you a successful relocation. And, you know, people who end up going to graduate school, internships, postdocs, first jobs, have developed tremendous skills along the way. And one of the skills that we learn is that we have to be able to deal with uncertainty. And I'm really proud of how much people in our community at large in Division 17 psychology counseling have dealt with the uncertainty, and also stepped forward to deal with social justice issues and Black Lives Matter. And so for myself, I want to thank everybody. I also will put my information, as I think most of the panelists will, on the Qualtrics sheet and can be contacted. And Maggie, who's the co-chair of the task group, just said that we're all here to support you, and we are. Anybody else like to say something?
I think the one thing that I'll just add that I forgot to add while I was talking is, you know, on the technology front, you just want to make sure that you have a laptop that works well, and you take that with you to internship. And if you do need to work remotely for most of your internship, I would ask your training director if there are laptops available to borrow. I know a couple of our interns did not have their own personal laptops, so we let them ours for the remainder of the semester. So just something else to check in about, make sure that you're prepared on that front too. But I do echo everything that Sue said, and Maggie as well. You know, your training directors want to do their best to support you, and we are always open to questions. And so don't be afraid to email. It's always better to ask than not. So that's what we're here for. And I'm just very happy to be on this panel today, and I'm happy to answer questions after this as well. I think our contact information will go out, so feel free to reach out and ask questions.
I don't have anything to say. Oh, I was just going to say, I don't have anything especially insightful to wrap up with, other than I want to certainly wish everybody the best with their move and getting acquainted to a new place and the new internship or postdoc or other position that y'all may be starting for those who are moving. And certainly the sort of sentiment that I think has been really common in what we've all said is just that I think folks are available to support one another. And just to sort of say it again, that I think I really want to encourage folks to seek out or ask whatever support you might need, especially if there may be folks who might not be aware that you might benefit from that support.
And as a reminder, the video will be available on the Division 17 YouTube channel and the Division 17, and I may need corrected on this, I'm not sure, I think it's on the Division 17 Facebook page, but it might be the web page. Bye. Safe travels.